want to welcome you and let you know how great it is to have you here for the Greater Purpose Podcast.
What's up? Welcome to the Greater Purpose Podcast from the Cubs room. Cheering crowd in the background. You don't hear the cheering crowd. There you go. Hey, Nick Renson, yeah. There will actually be cheering crowds that they will hear. We don't hear that here in the Cubs room. So, but here we are. Welcome to the Greater Purpose Podcast. Glad to have you here. Don't forget, you got to like, you got to share. You got to do all that stuff. My producer, who's not here today, not his fault. The producer's chair is empty, not his fault. I failed to tell him that we had a podcast scheduled for today. And I also failed to set my phone on airplane mode. So now it's been... And so now what you just saw was we had a phone call. And I failed. See, this is why I need a full-time producer to be sitting in the producer's chair. So he can do this job for me, because I obviously don't do it very well. After the 56th, I believe this is our 56th, maybe 57th podcast. I can't even remember. So I apologize for that. I guess this is the kind of stuff I should know. If I had a producer here, he'd be telling me.
Jump right in.
You're right, exactly. So, all right, I'm going to introduce my guest in just a second. Sorry for that little bit of extra stuff at the beginning. But anyway, don't forget to go to the-greater-purpose.com. There it is right there, the-greater-purpose.com. And you can catch up on the podcasts. You can follow up on other information about ministries and that kind of stuff. You can also look up stuff about my business. There's my shameless plug for my businesses and for my executive producer's business, which my executive producer, if you don't know, is my wife, my awesome wife, Donna Ward. She is an Avon rep. So yeah. If you need any skin so soft or anything, you go right here. You can link right up to it. How do you like that? Also, you still have time. April 15th today. Oh, that's tax day. This is tax day. Boo. Okay, anyway. April 15th today, right? You still have time. The Greater Purpose of a Godly Man Men's Conference is April 27th. So, I say that, but as the time of this recording, we still have tickets available, but there may not be tickets available. So I apologize if I promoted it again and you can't get any tickets. But if you can, the e-tickets are available for free. So you just go to the Greater Purpose channel, the-greaterpurpose.com, and then you can link to the tickets there. And hopefully we still have some tickets available for you. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump in right here. So, Jonathan Pugh, did I say it right?
Sir.
I did it.
Sir.
Wow, this is good.
Yeah.
So listen, I normally know every single guest that's I have known every guest that's ever come in here. This is, I think, the very first podcast guest that I've had come in who I actually just met.
Yeah.
So I did all right there.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, good. Jonathan
I feel
Pugh.
like we've known each other through Richard. We're part of the Cubs family.
Plus the Cubs family. Look at this.
I've heard about the Cubs for years, and this is my first time here.
And
so
here
this
you are.
is like,
and what do you think?
this is like a bucket list kind of a thing right here.
There you go.
I mean,
I had a friend call it the eighth wonder of the world, so I'm not sure about that.
It is. I'm in awe.
Yeah.
I really am.
So these other guys that come through here, they spend a little bit of time looking around and stuff like that. But of course, the Cubs fans, they come and they want to spend a little bit longer. So that's cool. I'm glad to have a fellow Cubs fan. We're not saying we don't want Braves fans or anybody in here, but it's especially great to have Cubs fans in here.
There's something about Cubs fans, like anywhere you go in the country, if you're wearing your Cubs gear, like Cubs fans spot each other, there's a kindred.
I do this at county fairs or state fairs or whatever, and we're walking through, and I can see it's like a radar. My wife will tell you it's like a radar, and I can literally see through an entire crowd of people and see the Cubs emblem, and I'll go Cubs, and then if they're really a Cubs fan or not, or if they just like the logo because they turn around and they're looking. So there's a special bond there. So, and you Braves fans, I guess you have that too. I'm not sure. So, no, just kidding. We like to do that here. We throw them under the bus. So, but anyway, so Jonathan, I know you're a Cubs fan. And I know kind of a little bit about you through our good friend Richard.
Richard, yeah.
But also
Cubs fan number 2 on the podcast.
Right, yeah. Actually,
three. He was
2.
He was 3. I'm 3.
Yeah,
okay.
So Artie Beatty was our first official Cubs fan in here. And then you were second, and then there was somebody in here that was a Cubs fan, but not quite as quite as what's the word, zealous as we are for the Cubs. Yeah. So, but anyway, so I know a little bit about you, but why don't you tell everybody out there exactly who you are?
Okay, so I'm Jonathan Pugh. I'm now 40. I just turned 40 years old.
Youngster.
So yeah, I'm been married for 18 years this year to my wife Jennifer. We have 5 kids.
Wow.
They are age 15 down to 5.
Man.
I've been a pastor since 2008. Been in Gaston County since 2012. I've been at Venture Church since 2016.
There with Richard, yep.
With Richard. Mm-hmm. And my role there at Venture Church is I oversee basically anything having to do with discipleship groups.
Yeah.
So anything from how are we reaching people through the one-on-one discipleship of the lives of the people in the church. How are we offering pastoral care to people? But most importantly, we believe that spiritual growth, by and large, happens through those groups, when groups of people, including groups of men, get together, share God's word together, speak into one another's lives, talk about what's going on in their lives, but most importantly, look to God's word as to what does God have to say to us, and then listen through prayer. That's where change happens in people's lives, and that's where growth happens.
Yeah, discipleship is important. We talked about that a little bit beforehand, and the networking and the building in and all that kind of stuff. You guys, please do that out there. Make sure you're building into someone else's life, and make sure they're building into your life in a spiritual way, but also in ways that encourage and build up and that kind of thing. So very cool, awesome. So you're young. You're 40, huh? Just a young guy. That's all right. So and married at 22.
Yeah,
22.
Yeah, I was 22. Yeah,
there you go. So when did you first recognize the importance of becoming? We say this. I always do this because if this is somebody's first podcast, we don't want them to think that we think that we're all godly and all this stuff. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is we understand that there's a walk in Jesus Christ that you have to take, and that is a godly walk. So when did you first recognize that?
I think when you talk about walk, I think it's important to recognize. It's not that we've arrived. I mean, the Bible's actually clear on this, that if somebody says I have no sin, or another way of putting that is I've arrived. Chances are you haven't.
Not, right?
That's a really good sign that
nowhere
you're
close. Yeah, exactly.
So, but on the same time, like what we're heading towards, what our vision in life is indicative of where we're heading in life, and it's indicative of who our God is. So for me, I guess this gets into a little bit of my story, which I think probably most of us we grow up, or we don't think there's much unique about our story, and mine's in some ways is very normal, but as I've grown up, and I guess this is how I answer the question, I've realized my story, my upbringing, it actually is unique. In that I actually grew up in a Christian home with godly parents, a godly dad, parents who had me in church 3 times a week, and I can remember all those. I always tell people I remember those days as a kid where we'd play like things are different for kids now. They don't play outside all day, but my whole upbringing was I wanted to play outside. And I remember Sundays like, why we got to go to church on Sunday night in the summer when I could be playing baseball a little bit more.
Absolutely.
And I'd be pretending I'm Mark Grace, because I wasn't the power hitter. I like to. I didn't always
Mark
wear.
Grace, mine was Billy Williams.
So but that was just. That's what you did. That's how I grew up, and so for me, that was a normal upbringing. But as I've gotten older, I realized that's anything but a normal upbringing, and so that in a very good and powerful way has colored how I realized the importance of being a godly man, in that I've always just grown up, not consciously, but just grown up wanting to be like my dad.
Yeah.
My dad's engaged in ministry. He's been a jail chaplain now since before I was born. So 42 years he's been engaged. It is tough. And I don't think I ever realized how tough it was until I got into ministry itself. And I'm like, if normal church people are hard enough to walk with, what about inmates are that much harder? But he's done it for 42 years, and so just
give him a shout out.
I'll do it.
He might be on your hero list.
He's going to be on it, but yeah, he's in Bluntville, Tennessee.
Okay, all right, cool.
East Tennessee now. So I can't say that there's a time when I recognize the importance of being a godly man, just because I've always had that.
Yeah.
I've always had that poured into me. Like, I've always, and I think I think most of us do that. We naturally just want to be like our dads. We want to follow in his footsteps.
Those who had those kind of dads.
Yeah.
So, and then when we say that on here too.
Yeah.
For some, we talked about this at our men's event this past Monday night. If just because you grew up completely different than I grew up doesn't mean you don't have a testimony. It doesn't mean I don't have a testimony. We just have different testimonies.
It's not a bad. It's not the right story or the wrong story. It's your story, and it's what God's done.
You got it.
God uses good things and bad things. God uses. Now, my wife has a very different story. I'm not going to share her story, but she comes from a very broken family relationship with her dad. But yet God, there's just so many stories of redemption in her relationship with her dad as well.
That brings you together, and then you guys have your stories.
Yeah.
So good. So a progression started young, and it's kind of evolved into who you are today.
Yeah.
So cool. All right. So in that, you just mentioned your dad. So I assume that would be if you had to pick one. It's hard to do. I know that. Let's say if you had to pick one, who would be your biggest male inspiration to your life in becoming a godly man? And you just mentioned your dad, but you don't have to say that.
Well, I'm going to mention that just because that's who I've seen the most of.
Sure, right.
I've seen the good and seen the bad, but I think just in just seeing the steadfastness of
tell us about him a little
following Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dad, he came to Christ in a family that wasn't a church-going family. He came to Christ, I think, through the influence of his grandmother, and through his involvement of church growing up. Actually, his dad became a Christian later in life, and became committed to Christ. And I didn't know. I didn't know my dad's father. He died in his 50s. So I think not long after he came to Christ. And my dad has shared with me on occasions. He's like, that's one of the best blessings I ever had, was I got to be there to watch my dad come to Christ. And sort of, you were sharing a story with me off air of, someone who had a late in life conversion. I don't think it was that late in life, but it was just, just knowing that it's never too late. It's never too late for God to change somebody's life. And that should give us all hope. That should give us hope as Christians in what we do. And so my dad has testified of that. And then just, he always felt, I think a special calling to ministry, and went to college for that. And I think started volunteering in jail ministry in college, and then as soon as he got out of college, there was a position opened up where.
So how old is just curious? How old is your dad?
My dad is, let's see,
60.
He is 60. He's 63 now.
Wow,
63.
I'm
he just turned 63.
So I'm old enough to be your dad.
Almost. Yeah, you are. That's crazy. That is crazy.
Yeah, when you're talking about it, I'm like, that doesn't seem like that long ago to me, and there we go. So yeah.
Well, and so by virtue of what my dad does for a living, I had just it's normal to you growing up, but you look back, you realize how everyone else grows up. You're like, man, that was really unique in that he had to go raise his support he still has to raise the support from churches and individuals. And one of the cool things about that is I got to grow up being exposed to lots of churches and lots of different Christians from different walks and different backgrounds and all of those things and just and so the other thing that's cool about that, and you don't realize this side of it until you become a father and you have bills and responsibilities and you got to take care of your family. He's always operated in a faith-based ministry, and we never missed a meal. So for a lot of, I don't know if I could operate. I would have a hard time operating on that just as a provider. But yet my dad never had a problem doing that. Like always just demonstrated faith that God's, like, we never missed a meal. God's always going to put food on the table. God always provides. And there was a steadfastness of just faith in just so many different aspects of life. Right? There's no way I could probably talk about every aspect of life when grow up in that environment. Right. But it's almost like you learn that. And I guess this is what I want to an emphasis I just want to encourage people with on the podcast is when you grow up in a home with parents who are not perfect but are following Christ as best they can. And living that out day by day, you learn a lot of these things by osmosis. So it's not, I can't remember very many specific conversations where Dad sat me down and said, you should do this or you should do that. It's just
part of life.
It's part of life. You just watch what they do, and you're like, well, I'm going to live my life that way because that's a good life. It's a life I respect, but it's what I've always seen.
Right. And it's prepared you for who you are today and what you do today. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So neat stuff. So maybe we need to get your dad on here sometime. That would be kind of cool.
He'd love that.
He's got a great story. Yeah.
So. And I'll say this about my dad. My dad's not a sports fan.
Okay.
He never was. My dad's always kind of which I love to read. I'm a bookish kind of guy, but I get that even more from my mom than from my dad. But that's my dad. But I realize now, like, I can't comprehend somebody not loving sports.
Yeah.
Right. It's not that my dad dislikes them. He's just not. He's not the fan that I am.
Right.
But I realize now, like my dad, because he loved me, we'd go to multiple minor league ball games a week. So I got to, looking back,
because you liked it.
I grew up in Greensboro, so I grew up,
Greensboro Bats.
The Bats, and before that they were the Hornets. Well, when they were the Hornets, I mean, look at who because my dad, who didn't care anything about sports, I got to go multiple times a week seeing Rivera, Jeter, Posada playing single A ball and.
That's pretty cool.
Stuff you can tell your grandkids about.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And your dad took you. That's neat stuff. Even though it wasn't his thing.
Even though it wasn't his thing, he would do it, cool. and so I remember that.
So that's your main one, and you're going to talk about some more in a minute, I think, some heroes in faith. But before you do that part, tell me, and you told me a little bit beforehand in your discipleship, and I'm going to assume that's part of it, but maybe you're going to go a different direction. But how do you feel like you are most effective in building into affecting and effecting other men and boys in their godly walk?
Well, the first, and I kind of saw this amongst my peers growing up, like other people didn't have the family I had growing up. And that was always like, man, it's hard to imagine that, but then you realize some of the anger and the pain that different people have towards not having those sorts of examples that I took for granted. Then I married my wife, and she never had that sort of relationship with her dad. She had a relationship with her dad that became a good friendship. But not the kind of relationship where she could say, I'm growing up under that sort of influence. So my first jobs in ministry were youth ministry, being a youth pastor, and the biggest shock that I had was, I knew that people who don't go to church tend to have harder family situations, but I wasn't prepared that people in the church have very difficult family situations more often than not. And that's not universal. Everyone's situation is unique. But when I started getting to know students in youth ministry, I realized, man, there's hurt here for things that they just aren't getting from their dads, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I came to a conviction through that involvement that's one of the primary areas that I think the church is intended to be a home for Christians, to be a home for the believers, that
a safe place.
Like no matter what you did or didn't grow up with in a home, you should be able to be a part of the church, be a part of God's family, and find godly masculine influences who they're not going to fully take the place of a father, but they can provide a lot of those things that people may or may not lack at home. And so that's kind of fed into, I think, how and why I take the course of the ministry that I take, wanting to strengthen groups, wanting to strengthen discipleships, wanting to provide avenues within the church where people can relate to one another, feed into one another, build one another up, because I know that especially for younger men, those relationships, and so for me, I kind of feel like there's a group of young men that I'm an older brother to, that I just kind of have that.
That sounds weird to me since you're old enough to be your dad. But
I can be an older brother to them and have that kind of relationship with them, and I love that. Like that's one of the great joys that I get to wake up and get paid to go do that. Like, cool. I mean, that's a God blessing to me. But I see the church as that for people. That is where young men and young women as well, but we're here to talk about men. Where young men can go, and whatever you lack at home, like you can, like God has provided everything that you lack on your own.
Right. And if you strengthen the man and you strengthen the family, then you strengthen.
Unknown caller.
Oh man, I didn't put my phone on the.
That's okay. We like that. We like having fun.
Sorry.
No, that's no problem. But if you strengthen the man, you strengthen the family, then you strengthen the community, you strengthen the state, you strengthen the country, you strengthen the world. So you've got to strengthen the men. Spiritually, they've got to be stronger, and some who don't have the deep roots that you have can get closer to having those deeper roots if we build into their lives like you're talking about. So so if you guys are not involved, if you're thinking about it, you're not sure, listen, here's two guys right here that can show you somewhere to plug in. So and any of the guys who come through here on the podcast can show you some place to plug into. So if you're not plugging in, it's your fault. Nobody else, is your fault.
Well, and this is
I like to do that. I like to point at people.
You got to plug your job. I'm gonna plug my job. There's a misconception. Like we're in Gaston County. We're in the Bible Belt. Like statistically, most people don't go to church every week.
Right.
But most people know that they should go to church every week. Right. They know that there's an idea it's Sunday morning, I should be in church. What I want to challenge, and this may not be you, or it may be you if you're listening to the podcast. I want to challenge this idea that church is somewhere I go once a week, and I sit on a bench.
That's why I said plug in.
Yep. And that's fun. Like that's important to go and listen to preaching, go and be part of the worship through music, but that's not church.
Right.
Church is the body, it's the family, it's the relationships that you obtain through, and you only obtain those by putting time into them, by going to small groups, going to men's groups, conferences where you have breakfast, where you have the opportunity to meet meet other men. But that's so vital. It's like I as a pastor, I would say that's not optional.
Yeah,
if you want to grow in Christ.
Right. Well, that's why I say that's probably an old man's term, plug in. But that's what we call it.
That works. Yeah.
Plug into the church. We've
Yeah.
shared that with some of our men in our men's ministry. I say plug in, serve somewhere, get involved somewhere, be involved, because that's how you grow.
And it does. And you were sharing with me, it doesn't have to be a big ministry.
Absolutely.
Some of the greatest ministries that you have are ministries with 2, 3, 4, 5 men who just commit to one another and commit to pouring into one another's lives.
Yeah. You look back at some of the greatest people who made the greatest impact in ministry, and they may have made that, they had the big huge ministry, but you go back 2 or 3 tiers, and who built into this person's life, and then this person, this person, and then this one was where God just exploded. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're doing, guys. We're serving the greater purpose, and it starts, it's in some cases little by little, and it builds. So, but anyway, great, cool. All right, so you chose 5 heroes of the faith.
Ooh. All right,
that you want to tell us about.
So it's we'll have to narrow some of them down.
Okay.
5 heroes,
and to clarify, 5 heroes of the faith can be current, can be in your life, can be somebody you've read and studied about. It could have been Martin Luther, it could have been Billy Graham, could have been or it could be David, could be Moses.
Let's start in the Bible. Let's start in the Bible with I don't know why I always relate to this guy, but I do. Jacob.
Okay.
Jacob in the Bible is to me a hero of faith. If you read his story, there's nothing blatantly heroic about Jacob. So here's the guy. He's a mama's boy. So he's not like there's 2 brothers.
Yeah, right off the bat.
One's a man's man and one's not the man's man. Right. So the one that's not the man's man is the one that God chooses.
Yeah.
He's scheming.
Mm-hmm.
He's a conniver.
Well, his name means the name Jacob means something. I just heard this on Tony Evans the other day. Now I can't remember.
I think it's something along the lines of scheming, and winds up having to leave his family, make his own way. Well, he meets his match in Uncle Abe, and I'm not going to belabor the whole story, but it's the biggest portion of the book of Genesis. It focuses on this man Jacob, so that's always significant.
Sorry about that.
And but he has just God intervenes in his life, in some powerful ways. There's the story when he has to leave, where he sees this ladder to heaven, and he makes a covenant. He says, God, if you bring me back here, you'll be my God.
Right.
Well, the whole story, a lot of life happens before he comes back. The schemer gets schemed,
right,
and he realizes he's not the biggest and best schemer on the planet.
You can't out scheme God.
You can't out scheme God, and when he comes back, he has a wrestling match with God and has his name changed, and he walks with a limp afterwards. Like he's not the same man afterwards, physically, spiritually, mentally. But he's now the father. Now he's the father of this nation, these 12 tribes. He adopts. It's no mistake that it becomes the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Mm-hmm. And it all has to do with this wrestling match with the God man. And there's a lot of I study the Bible for a living. I haven't figured out is this an angel? Is this Christ, Jesus himself? But it's God.
Right.
It's
exactly.
it's the presence of God. Either way you look at it, he wrestles with him and it changes. And so just the idea
God can use even somebody with a terrible beginning, a schemer,
especially.
Absolutely.
Especially
somebody who's not perfect. Yeah.
That's and read about that's a jacked up family.
Yeah. Right. That's true. You're right.
Multiple wives.
You're right.
And, I like this one and I don't like that one, and this son, this is my favorite. Like, if you're a dad, don't do that. Like, this is my favorite son, and the rest of you are supposed to serve him.
Right.
His family was a train wreck, and yet God intervened. God used it, and God did. And then you come to the end of Genesis, and he's blessing these sons and calling them around, and one of those sons becomes, a tribe that's going to birth a king, and is going to have not just the other sons, but the nations of the world are going to be blessed and serve this king.
Yeah.
And that's the blessing that flows to us.
Right. Kind of falls into our modern day, what we're talking about with the greater purpose here.
Yeah.
He didn't necessarily do everything he was supposed to do, but he apparently did the things that God wanted to do at the times that God wanted him to do it. So
he learned his lessons.
Yeah.
He learned his lessons the hard way.
Right.
Through the school of hard knocks, but he learned them.
Yeah. So just remember that part.
Yeah.
God can use you if you're not perfect, but that doesn't mean he wants you to stay that way. So he wants you to be improving and serving. So cool. Yeah. Jacob, that's a great one.
So Jacob's one. Cool. Another one from the Bible, who I love is Barnabas. Like I want to be Barnabas.
Wow. Okay.
I
don't think anybody's ever picked Barnabas, but yeah.
Yeah, well, he's one of those, like, he's not Paul.
Yeah.
He's not the guy out front. He's not the guy in the forefront.
But without Barnabas, there's no Paul.
He's a massively Paul would not be Paul without Barnabas.
Absolutely.
Like, Barnabas was there when nobody believed in Paul.
Yeah.
Nobody believed in Paul. I mean, Paul was the guy you can't really trust.
Right. Yeah.
Until Barnabas went and said, and it took him under his wing, brought him to the church, and says, this is a guy that God has his hand on. God has a plan for this guy, Paul.
Nice.
And Barnabas didn't just do that with Paul. He did it with Mark. He did it with, you just get the sense that was Barnabas's ministry. That's what he did, was he took people under his wings and he loved them.
Yeah.
And he was, a little, almost a little bit of a softy, but then when you read what he did on his missionary journeys with Paul, he wasn't a softy. No, right. He was a man of conviction, but he was a man who had conviction and love side by side, which is
pretty good balance. Yeah.
It's a hard combination to find in today's world.
Right. So you don't have to be Jacob. You don't have to be Paul. You could be Barnabas.
Yeah.
Right. So you can be So there we go. That's pretty cool. We're setting some pretty good standards right here. I like that. So All right. So who else? You want to pull somebody else out, or?
We can. I can go on this forever.
Modern day, historical.
Man, let's fast forward a lot of years. My favorite theologian, my favorite pastor.
Okay.
In American history, at least, Jonathan Edwards.
Oh. Okay.
So here's a guy, another bookish, kind of super smart, bookish kind of guy. Wasn't a forceful personality, but yet God used that personality that you wouldn't think of to be a big part in a revival in America. And he was a proponent of it. Like he help people to see, hey, God's at work, and you need to give your life to Him, and all of those things you think about.
Yeah, he was behind it. Yeah.
He was behind a lot of the movement, but he left us so much good theology, and good writing, and worship. Like when you read Jonathan Edwards, you read that this is a man who it wasn't just a relationship with God wasn't an idea; it was something he lived.
Mm-hmm.
It was he would go out and worship God on a daily basis, and he wrote a lot about the beauty of God and
which really we're all supposed to be doing.
We are, and so I find him to be very, very.
I mean, when's the last time you sat in your car and looked out the window and said, "God, thank you for this. Thank you for even in the midst of turmoil, even in the midst of difficulties, that kind of thing." So still praising God and worshiping Him for all that He has. The one main thing that He did was salvation. That's all. That's enough right there to worship Him forever, day in and day out. So, but there's so much more we have to be thankful for. So he was good at I think showing us the importance of worshiping Him for more than just our daily needs and that kind of thing. So, but so go ahead. Yeah.
Number 4. This is I don't know if I categorize this as a hero of faith, but he's a kind of one more side of leadership that I like to read about and learn from. Andrew Jackson.
Oh,
this
wow.
is
There you go.
when you think about Andrew Jackson, not when I say I would have a hard time telling people emulate Andrew Jackson. He did a lot of bad stuff, But on the other hand of that, spiritually speaking, he grew up knowing the faith. I believe on some level having faith, definitely through his wife, and at the end of his life, he made a commitment.
Yeah,
I believe to be part of the church, and he understood, and he had such a high view of the. Some people have such a high view of things that they won't make the commitment themselves, even if it's something they believe internally. I kind of feel like that was Jackson's relationship with the faith. I don't know that. I didn't know him. He lived too long ago. But from a leadership standpoint, this was a man that people followed. And the reason they followed him was because when he said something, he meant it. He had we think, and integrity has a lot of aspects to it. Honesty, but sometimes integrity seems repulsive to some people because you're just too honest. You're going to stick by what you say. But in his case, that was the basis of his leadership. Like people would go into battle with this dude. People from all walks of life. Like he built you look at the Battle of New Orleans, and you look at the army that he led. It was a ragtag, motley crew, but they understood. He was able to rally this diverse group of people from all walks of life to have what was at that point the greatest military victory in the history of our country. And he did it because people believed in what he was saying. They believed that he believed what he was saying. And that's so important. That
like you said, his integrity, right? Exactly.
Yeah. So that's just that one aspect of him. I try to think about that. Like our convictions. Like we have to live by our convictions. We have to stand by them.
Say what you mean and mean what you say. Right.
Yeah. He had a lot of enemies.
Yeah.
some self-inflicted, but some because he stood by his convictions politically. Right. And I think the country's better for some of those.
Sure. Hugely. Yeah, for sure. Cool. All right. So Andrew Jackson. I'm pretty sure that's the first time. I think.
It might be the only time.
Who knows? Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe not. So, all right.
And the fifth one is just from a pastoral standpoint. I never actually met him. Heard him speak on one occasion, but I listened to him a lot through technology. Tim Keller.
Oh yeah.
Passed away last year, but just the way that he was able to winsomely, thoughtfully articulate the faith and explain the Bible, explain things, but
he's on XM radio. I listen to him.
Is he now? Is he now? That's awesome.
and they tell you, gosh, it might be the 2:00 hour. I can't remember now, but they tell you that these were from his years as pastor for the years that he was pastor, and so
everything that he did, everything that he preached and said, you could tell it just flowed out of a pastor's heart, and just it was like he could be preaching to 1,000 people, but it's like he's having a conversation.
Yeah, no, I agree with
speaking
that.
Right,
he comes across that way. He sure does. Yeah. So that's the interesting thing about some of the pastors that I listen to on radio and on XM, whatever you want to call it. Listening to them for a while and then either not seeing them or not seeing their congregation or not knowing anything about that. And then suddenly you realize after you've been listening for a while that they're preaching to like 10,000 people. When for 2 years you've been listening to them on the radio and you're thinking that they're just got this little small congregation that they're preaching. It's pretty cool. That is something very special and very
to feel like you know somebody and you've never met them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this podcast is about you, not about me, but I've had several circumstances where that's happened and have been able to meet some of those people. And it's like, and the funny thing, the interesting thing, not funny, but amazing thing is when you meet them, the impression you got from listening to them is the exact impression you got when you met them. So, and there's several. Jensen Franklin's one of them. Met Charles Stanley, a couple others. That was exactly what you got from them. What you saw, what you heard, what you felt was the same thing in person as. And I think that's why they're successful in the ministry. So, because it comes across that way. Cool, awesome, great. You did that very well. That was nice. I like the way you mixed it up real nice there. So, so that's all the spiritual stuff. Now we go to the non-spiritual stuff.
Okay.
All right. Talk about your sports. Of course, we've already talked about sports a little bit. Anyway,
a little bit.
But let's talk about your favorite sports-related story.
Oh, man.
You got 1,000 of them. You're in the Cubs room. There's got to be all kinds of stuff, right?
Well, I mean,
what's that
well,
one?
I can't. We record this ahead of time, so I can't. Yeah. Maybe I'll have. If Duke wins the national championship, that'll be I'm a Duke fan too. So that'll be my latest favorite story.
If Duke won, no wait, we'll see. April 15th would be a week later.
Yeah.
So if Duke won,
that'll be my
Monday,
favorite. That's my favorite sports story right now.
Okay,
but let's, you've already talked about 2016. I'm sure a lot. But so you got to look at the era that I came. So. You became a Cubs fan in the good era.
Yeah, I know.
I did come in the good era, but like we had some great. So my earliest memory, I would say about 91 is when I really remembered starting to watch the Cubs regularly, and I'd watch them every day.
Yeah,
I mean that's just how it was on the Superstation with Harry Carey. And what was cool was when I'd go to my great grandparents in Iowa, they didn't have WGN because they didn't have cable except on Saturday. Then they could watch Harry Carey. But that was when it was always weird. You remember watching on the Superstations, he would 4th through 6th innings, he'd go do radio, and I guess he'd swap out with Steve Stone or
whoever was the radio guy.
Yeah, whoever was the radio, they'd swap out every 3 innings. Well, you go to Iowa and you can listen to Harry Carey on the radio some, So that was always cool, and then they'd always watch the Saturday games.
See, I grew up watching the black and white TV games. That's what I watched.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
but
with the ear, the aluminum foil on the ears, and you did this until you could get it, and then you said,
But we had some awesome teams in the '90s, and no pennants.
Right.
I know. Some really great teams and nothing to show for it.
Just always fell short.
You look at Rhino, Maddox, Sutcliffe, Grace.
Yes, Maddox was ours. Braves fan.
Yeah,
he was ours.
Okay, so for a long time, I kind of liked the Braves until they took Maddox. I hate you guys. I'm not coming back around. I was happy to see him, finally win another championship. But then in the '90s, I couldn't I didn't know what free agency was. And I was too young to realize that. Now they just took Maddox,
Now it's all free agency.
And I mean, he was incredible.
Well, there were several others that made the crossover too. Jerome Henderson, Dwight Clark, I think, a couple others that went. There's some pretty good. If you look it up, there are a lot of players that were on both Cubs and Braves. So check it out sometime. But anyway, that was not your sports story. But
the worst story was 2003.
Cool. You're changing it up. We got a worst one.
Yeah. This ain't my favorite. This is the worst that I remember. Okay. I remember so vividly.
Yes.
Being a Cubs fan, watching the Bartman game, and I feel so bad that he's the one who gets remembered for that. But it was the mentality of the team. When you saw Alou throw down the glove, he just forgot we're ahead, and we still got a game to play. And it was just this. It was the weirdest feeling ever to watch that collapse in real time, and it was.
Well, so here, I'll tell you from my perspective.
I had a dark 2 weeks after that.
Being 21 years older than you, when I was in I'm going to tell one of my stories. I was in New York. We were in a hotel watching that game on TV, and we were up. How many games? We were up in the series, and we were up in the game, I believe. And when that happened, I got up and I turned the TV off. And the people that I was with watching is going, "What are you doing?" They were not Cubs fans. They were going, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "It's over." And what do you mean it's over? You still you're ahead in the series. You're crazy. And
so
Sure enough,
like it was a fatalism from the guys, from the fans to the players. Like there's fatalism through the whole organization. It was
ingrained in us back in the 60s.
Oh my God!
But I will tell you this though, in 2016, there was something all season, and I don't like, if I know my team's going to win, I don't come up to your face. I know they're going to. I don't do that. That's not smart, first of all, but it's also not. It's not something I do. I knew they were going to win. I mean, all season, just listening to game after game after, I'm like, they're going to win this. They're going to win this. They're going to be in the World Series, and they're going to win this. Now, like I said, I didn't like shout it out to everybody because then it'd be like, But so yeah, you kind of know. It's ingrained in you. It's in your blood. The W is in your blood. The C and the W. Yeah, cool. All right,
the W.
There you go. So he gave us his worst.
I'm changing everything up on you.
We love it. That's awesome. So that's cool. So, you know what I forgot to do? So before you did your sports story, but I'm glad we didn't, because then you would have had time to think about it. It might not have been as impromptu. I'm supposed to give you your parting gifts. So did you know you get parting gifts? You didn't know that?
That's awesome.
Yeah. So first of all, here's your first parting gift. It's a bottle of Mr. Bill's STEM and Bill Ward Photography Hand Sanitizer. Again, a shameless plug for my business. But look at that. How valuable is that? Is that amazing?
Awesome.
Or what? Yeah. Are you faking? Did you really know? And you just acting like you didn't know? Well, I think you didn't. You knew because you watched.
I have watched before.
Okay,
but you don't know what the gifts are going to be.
See, but they're always the same. So I guess I should change it up a little bit. You also will get You will have an autograph. Let's see. 54, 55, 56, 57th podcast. I will autograph this before you leave. I'm pretty sure you're number 57. I will autograph. This is an official Willie Ace. That's me. Yeah, see there? Willie Ace on the back of the. He hasn't got a shout out in a while. There's Mr. Bill, Willie Ace, bobblehead.
That's amazing.
He's always in the frame. Sometimes we notice him, sometimes we don't. But anyway, so I will autograph that, and it'll be worth exactly what it is when you leave here. And also, you get to choose a superhero. Now, I have been announcing this. I am still waiting on my shipment of superheroes. These things are really hard to get, believe it or not. Now. And you buy them by bulk, and then it takes forever. But anyway, so I'm waiting on some superheroes. So these are Lego superheroes. You get to choose a Lego superhero, and you say to yourself, why a Lego superhero?
Why a Lego superhero?
Dude, that was awesome. You're so good. I know you. Because if you watch the podcast, you know Legos, you got to build a Lego superhero. You got to build it. Science, technology, engineering. Engineering is what? Building things, right? Mm-hmm. You got to build it. So there's the tie-in to the STEM. But the main reason is because we feel like the guys who come through here on the Greater Purpose podcast are superheroes in God's eyes. So you get to pick your superhero if we can figure out who it is. That's Nick Fury right there. How about that? And there's Rocky Raccoon from the Guardians of the Galaxy. And now some of these are women. That's another disappointing thing. I'm not disappointed in women, but some guys don't want to take a superhero that's a woman, because there's Gamora, and there's Captain Marvel, Mrs. Marvel, and there's Pepper Potts. I'm pretty sure that's Pepper in a Iron Man, in an Iron Woman costume. And let's see, there's Hawkeye.
Let's go with the Guardians of the Galaxy.
There you go.
There we go.
What's that? Rocky Raccoon? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Rocky? Yeah. There you go. Okay.
Awesome.
That's your selection. And you already gave your sports story. See, we're supposed to do that. I did it backwards. This is what, we've only been doing this for a little over a year now. So we don't know what we're doing. But we're supposed to do the parting gifts. And he gets, because he's a dedicated, devout, legit Cubs fan, he also receives this. Okay, don't freak out. It's a vial, all right? Don't panic. It's a vial, but in that vial is legitimately dirt from the 2016 Chicago Cubs field from the World Series. So they clean it out. If you guys don't know this, they take all the dirt out every year and they replace it with brand new dirt. So that's what they do. I
did not know that.
Yes, yeah. So This is actually removed from Wrigley Field in 2016, and it is yours. How about that? See,
I feel like I should
y'all Cubs fans, you're not Cubs fans, you don't get stuff like that.
That's awesome.
There you go.
Thank you so much,
Jonathan. I sure do appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And thanks for coming for the Greater Purpose podcast. God bless your ministry.
Thanks for doing it.
I'm sure he's going to do some more wonderful things through you, as he has been doing. Thank you all for being here. Like, share, subscribe. Let people know what we're doing here at the Greater Purpose Podcast. We appreciate you. We love you, and God bless.